The recordings you're about to hear were taken from 4 different contributors: Sam G, Margaret Sweet, Reverend Patrick Taylor, and Carol Taylor of CA Rooks. Each of these people tell us about their childhoods at different points in time, from the 1940s right through until the 1970s. We begin with Sam G, who is introduced by Kelly Rashley.
Sam's childhood was spent in Stratford-upon-Avon in the 1940s, and it really reflects the times. Here he is talking about playing in the road, talking to strangers, and roaming free.
And we were all able to play out in the road because there was no traffic. Private cars had been put in the garage and had bits taken off in case the Germans invaded. All right, we didn't play in the road. We were allowed to roam free. And I can remember, and I know I wasn't 7 years old because we hadn't moved away from Stratford. And my mother, in a moment of wisdom, says, wants me to get me out of the house, I should think, go and see if you can find some blackberries up Loxley Road. So off I went, past the last house in Loxley Road, and there's no pavements there then, of course. And I went, I never saw a car or anything. And she said, don't go in the middle of the road, walk on the side. And I walked up Loxley Road, then went left down Knight's Lane. Now, remember, there were no houses at all in Knight's Lane then. So I went wandering around there. Then I got to this funny little village with a little pub in it called the Crown. I was only 7, and I was absolutely worn out. I'd had loads of blackberries, apparently. Lips were all blackberries. There was about 3 blackberries in this punnet thing I'd been told to take. And a chap came along. Now, this shows you the difference, actually. He said, where do you live? He saw this little lad wandering around. I said, I live at Loxley Road, 138. I knew the number of the house. And he said, hop on my bike and I'll take you home. And he did. Now, that wouldn't happen today.
This was a time where children played outside with other kids in the neighbourhood, making up their own games.
Yeah, I mean, we did know what French cricket was, and football, but we didn't do much of that. We didn't have much. There wasn't any need. We were always climbing trees and ropes and God knows what. And teaching each other. I remember a girl called Lindy teaching me how to write figures down on a dustbin lid with a piece of chalk. Oh yes, there was a bigger group that lived in Loxley Road, and we were like a clan. We always used to dig holes in the road and cover them up and make sort of dens out of them and all this sort of stuff. And we used to go walking around and we didn't have any toys. There was no toy. You look at kids now and they get a barrage of toys at Christmas, the young kids. I had a 1 wooden engine, a little railway engine that somebody made for me, and a little horse on wheels. And actually, if we go out the front door now, it's still in the front garden. We had to put it out there because it was full of woodworm. But that was that. And a teddy bear. Did you see my teddy bear on my bed?
When Sam was a child, falling over and hurting your knee was all part of growing up. This is something that Sam feels this generation has lost.
The swings down there were quite dangerous by today's standards, and I can remember being absolutely horrified when they put this soft stuff down so if somebody fell off they didn't get hurt. Well, I still think that's counterproductive. If we were whizzing around on something, swinging around on something, and we fell off, we knew it was going to hurt and blood was going to come out, and with a bit of luck, an ambulance might turn up. And nobody sort of said, oh, no, don't do that, do that. And we used to play around like that. You fell out the odd tree sometimes, and bits and bobs like that. And it's always taught me to assess a situation before I take it on.
There was always a game to be had, even on equipment left over after the war.
At the top end of Loxley Road then, during the war at least, there was an anti-aircraft gun. And when the war ended, the thing was still there, and we used to go and play on that. And just behind this house in Manor Road, there was what would be called now a gravel pit, an old gravel pit. And they put all the tanks in there, armoured cars and stuff. And we quite happily used to play around in there, and we discovered these big long guns. If you wound a little handle round, it would swivel round. We used to take each other for rides on the barrel of this gun while we're swivelling it around. The thing we missed, rather gladly actually, was some of the kids that lived in Hull, who were my age and who I grew up with when I was in my 20s. They used to go through all the bombed buildings and go upstairs. Nobody sort of worried about somebody falling down and breaking a leg or anything like that.
Sam did some things growing up in Stratford that children today would never be allowed to do.
And I used to go down to the railway station and watch the steam trains going through. I wasn't a train spotter. I didn't collect numbers. I used to chatter to the drivers, and there was another down what's now the Southern Bypass was a railway line, and on a Sunday afternoon they used to do shunting in there. One old engine, just shunting a few trucks about, because it was all in those days, all the road that you hadn't got going on the roads yet. And one day this chap said, "Oh, you look cold, son. I'll pop in here." And they gave me a cup of tea and fried an egg on the shovel for me. And I was 14. I remember this dead easy. This is Christmas holidays. And so I went down the next week, and he said, and I said, "Can I drive this thing?" I've about 20 tons of engine. He said, "Righto." He says, "Now what you do, you push that thing down and you turn this little wheel here very slowly," he said. And I've actually driven a steam engine across the Southern Bypass Bridge. On the main line, where Sanctus Street Bridge is now, there was a little tiny signal box there. And I think I must have done work these two and I used to go up in there, and he used to let me pull the levers across to change the points.
Sam was schooled both in and out of Stratford.
And I used to walk to school when I was 7, and that was the Croft School. And a bit later on, I went on my tricycle down to the top end of Loxley Road. There was no roads to cross because Avon Crescent hadn't come through by that time. And I left this tricycle at a house at the end of Tiddington Road, and then a woman down there used to walk the pair of us.
We now hear from Margaret Sweet, who, as a ballet dancer, grew up in Stratford learning the ropes and treading the boards. Again, Margaret is introduced by Kelly Rashley.
Margaret danced her way through childhood, starting her lessons in very humble surroundings.
Began learning in the garden shed at the bottom of Broad Street, where Daphne Raybone taught as a hobby. She was the manageress of the picture house at that time. And people decided that I'd got a bit of a talent. I passed all my grades within 2 years with honours. The Sadler's Wells Ballet Company was here at the theatre, as they used to come touring in those days. And I went down for my lesson one day, and Miss Raybone said, "Margaret, I hope you won't mind, but these 3 ladies sitting here are very interested in dancing, and they wondered if you would mind if they watched you have your lesson." And of course I had no idea who they were. I mean, how eminent they were at all. They were just 3 ladies that were interested and wanted to watch me have a class. And I can remember them clearly saying to me, "Have you been to the theatre to see the ballet this week?" And my response was, "Not yet, but Mummy says if I'm a good girl, I can go on Saturday afternoon." So that was the first time I went to see a ballet at the theatre, and it was lovely. And following soon after that, my parents had a letter saying, could they possibly take me up to London, to Sadler's Wells, to meet Dame Ninette de Valois. And then I was offered a scholarship.
This is Margaret Sweet telling us about her childhood friends.
I had some very good friends at Hallscroft in the years when it was a private house. In fact, my father designed the gardens at Hallscroft, because apart from being a fireman and station leader, he was also an extremely good gardener. So he designed the gardens at Hallscroft when it was a private house. And I was treated as one of the family, which was lovely, because it belonged to the Count and Countess of Hinchinbrook. And they used to come and spend the summers here, and their grandchildren would come. And the 2 sets of grandchildren and I became friends. We'd go to the theatre sometimes in the afternoon, because when the new theatre was built, the Hinchinbrook family paid for a row of seats. And so the house was phoned just before lunch every day. Will you be requiring your seats this afternoon or not? And sometimes, if it was what the nanny and family thought suitable for 3 children, we often went to the theatre, and we all had white dresses with blue sashes. And I was treated as the other 2 grandchildren, which was wonderful for me.
Can you remember any of the performances that you went to see?
Oh yes, Midsummer Night's Dream, and Merry Wives of Windsor was a great favourite.
As a child, Sundays were always important to Margaret and her family.
Well, quite often my parents, when I was very small, went off to the 8 o'clock service, communion first, and I was left sitting in their double bed with the dog guarding me, so that I was trusted to stay in bed until they got back. And then later in the day, they took me to church with them, usually to evensong, which was a sort of lighter service, they thought. Then I went to Sunday school there, and in those days you had Sunday school in church because there was no church hall or anything. And there was a delightful lady who lived in one of the little almshouses in Rother Street who took us for Sunday school, and she really enthralled all of us. I mean, her enthusiasm for the stories in the Bible and everything fired a lot of us, I think. And when you've had that sort of grounding, you never forget it. It's always there. You might not always go to church, but the grounding is there, and there are things that crop up and you think, oh, I remember so-and-so telling me about that, you know. And
did you used to dress up?
Oh, yes. You always had a special coat and hat for Sunday, and special Sunday shoes, which as soon as you got back in, they were taken off and you put on your play clothes again. Yes. I can remember some lovely little hats for Sunday. Yeah. And then, of course, when the war came, and hats and everything just disappeared because they weren't around. But it was lovely. I remember one particularly lovely little... It was Easter time, and I had a lovely little green tailored coat. And there was a lady in Shipston Road who was blind, but used to make beautiful crocheted tamis, and also long white socks she used to crochet and make. And my mother used to take me there to talk to her occasionally and arrange for some 2 or 3 new pairs of long crocheted white socks for Sundays, and could she make me a new berry to go with the coat. Well, you find the wool you want, the right colour, and yes, I'll do it for you. She was a lovely lady. I don't know how long ago she passed away, but lovely memories of her. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, the thing is, you know, when I was growing up, if we were lucky, we had a wireless, no televisions, very few films, nowhere near the entertainment that is offered to people these days. So Sunday was sort of special and was set aside. The shops didn't open on Sunday, nor on Good Friday. And so Sunday was special. It was different. For people who didn't go to church, it was different. It was a day off. And for those of us who did, we had a different reason for it, and it was going to church.
And growing up in Stratford around the same time was Carol Taylor. Carol's childhood was spent in the area around the Ulster Road, and also took her to Broad Street School.
I didn't play an awful lot because of being on the main Ulster Road. I've had friends, and I went the other way, sort of up on what we call the New Road, which has been there for years. And my friend lived in East Green Drive, so it was sort of that way I went more than anything. And there was some children on the Ulster Road. I can remember my dad crossing me over the road, Ulster Road, to play in the spinney, where the lodge is, and we used to play in there. And he'd come home for his dinner at 1 o'clock and collect me, and then probably cross me back over, and we'd play with dens, make dens in the spinney, and yeah, we used to play hopscotch, skipping. When it's a nice day, the first thing to do is get the skipping rope out. But so I played quite a lot on my own because of being an only child and it being a main road. You don't sort of have it quite the same.
Carol enjoyed growing up on the Ulster Road, and then she went to Broad Street School, where things became a little more challenging.
I went to Broad Street School. I wouldn't say it was quite the highlight of my life. I had trouble with problems, and that was highlighted by one of the teachers. Or, you know, the only time I think my mum ever came to school with me, I couldn't do the problems. And as we took it was Thursday morning, we took the dinner money up, the teacher, Miss Lacey, as probably a lot of people would remember, she said to every child, "Can you do problems? Can you do problems? Can you do problems?" It got to me with my dinner money. Now we know you can't do problems. We used to go to bed in the afternoon if you were under 5, and you had a bed, And yeah, I was a kite, so you had a kite on your pillar, on your sheet, and your peg was a kite, and cod liver oil we used to have in the morning. You had a spoon, so mine was always in a kite. I've got pictures of going back, I think, of there as well, when we were at vivid memories of going to bed in the afternoon. I don't think I ever slept, but you had to have a rest because you weren't 5.
And finally, we are told about the Reverend Patrick Taylor's childhood, growing up in the 1970s.
Well, we moved to Wilmcote in, I think, 1976, when I was 4. My earliest memories in Wilmcote are of the Silver Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth, and dressing up in silly clothes for that, which happened within a year of us arriving. And we lived in Wilmcote, where my father was the vicar, from 1976 until we left in 1987, so just over 10 years.
Patrick also remembers coming into the town to go to the supermarket.
I particularly remember it must have been either before I started school or if I was off school sick one day or something, but coming in, my mum used to do a weekly shop at the Quay Market, which I think became Summerfield eventually. So we used to park in the Rother Street multi-storey and then go down into the supermarket. And I have a very particular memory of going shopping with my mum. My social life tended to be based on scouts. I was in the Bealey and Snitterfield Scout troop. We used to go up to the old airfield at Snitterfield, this hut, I don't know if it's still there, on the edge of what used to be the Second World War airfield. It was built on the foundations of one of the old sort of Nissan huts. And there were still the old buildings from when it was an airfield. And we used to wind each other up with stories that there were ghosts of, airmen that had died, and that there were still propellers from old Spitfires in these sheds. There probably weren't, it was full of junk, but that was the story we used to tell each other.
Thanks to all of these people, we begin to understand what childhood was like in Stratford between 1940 and 1970. And we can only begin to understand what people's childhoods will be like in years to come.